The question of whether or not aliens from other planets exist and whether or not they are visiting our planet is something that I've taken very little interest in for myself, for a very simple reason. I'm about halfway through my life, and yet I'm not halfway through reading and studying all the great books of wisdom that have been written through the centuries. So what possible excuse could I give to sacrifice the limited attention I can give to studying what I ought to in order to speculate about aliens on other planets, a subject for which I haven't been given any compelling evidence to think is of imminent concern? It neither affects me naturally or supernaturally to think about and draw conclusions about beings I have never seen nor am likely to do so. And yes, you could say that sightings are increasing and secret government files are being released, forcing us to confront the consequences of this potential revelation. But at the same time, we also live in an age in which faking evidence in the form of photo and video is easier than it is for me to get my groceries delivered, which is also incredibly easy. Point of fact is that every single image you've seen on the screen so far is one I or others faked using digital tools like Photoshop or AI. But for some reason, more recently, this subject has created controversy among online Catholics, as some have claimed that a disinterested evaluation of this subject is not only unacceptable, but that the wrong belief about it makes you a heretic and guilty of breaking the bonds of fellowship of the church. That if you don't take the exact same view about aliens that some of these other people do, then you're not part of the Holy Catholic Church. So I thought I would try to address it with the reassurance that you don't have to take a position on this subject. You can be casually disinterested in it and be a Catholic in good standing for the same reason the church has been casually disinterested in this subject. It hasn't, to my knowledge, made any official formal pronouncements about it, which is a pretty good hint that it shouldn't preoccupy much of our time or energy, and certainly shouldn't lead to people breaking communion with one another. But as a thought experiment or an exercise in speculation, this does bring up apparent dilemmas for Christians, and perhaps most importantly, in evangelistic conversations we might have. Because some people do believe in life on other planets, and they might intuit that this fact is incompatible with the claims of Christianity, and therefore good reason to remain outside of the church. Because the Bible and church teaching assert that human beings are unique among all creation. We were created in the image of God, and all creation was placed under our authority and for our benefit, according to the book of Genesis. Then in Romans 8, it says that all creation waits with eager longing for the effects of the salvation of humanity, as if its fate is tied to ours. And then Psalm 8 says that God created us just slightly less than God himself and crowned us with glory and honor. Then Hebrews 2, referencing that same song, reiterates that everything has been placed beneath our feet. And then, of course, there is the fact that God himself, in the second person of the Blessed Trinity, became man. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. He didn't become an angel. He didn't become a thundercloud or like a celestial body of plasma. He became a human being so that he could overcome our temptations, our fallen nature, and even death itself by entering into it and conquering it from the inside out. But if there are rational, conscious, and corporeal beings on other planets, that raises some questions that might compete with the claims of the church and the Bible. The most obvious to me, if UFOs suddenly appeared in the sky and were about to greet us, the first thing I would want to know is, are they fallen like us and therefore in need of redemption? Would they too have had an incarnation of God and even their own version of the Virgin Mary? But if those things were true, then our whole Christology about Jesus being a hypostatic union of humanity and divinity would be called into question, because he would also have had to adopt the nature of some other rational species. Or if it wasn't him, is there another divine person who did so, which would call into doubt the doctrine of the Trinity or monotheism in general? Or is it possible that they aren't fallen, in which case, would that make them better than us since we are fallen? Now, again, I don't think that these are pressing questions that confront our own faith, because as far as I can tell, there is no reasonable or convincing evidence that rational corporeal beings do live on other planets. But for the sake of Catholics who are preoccupied with this question, and for non-Christians who are anticipating the knowledge and the discovery of aliens being imminent, and then raise certain doubts about our faith, I think there are compelling answers to these kinds of questions. And to some, what might appear to be an unlikely source could help us understand how some of these possibilities can be reconciled. That is in J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, which might seem arbitrary to some, but it might surprise many to know that Tolkien intended those stories to be something like a prehistorical myth of our own world, and especially of Great Britain. It wasn't supposed to be some other world or reality. So the internal logic of his story is much more subject to the logic of our own world instead of arbitrary imagining of his own invention. And since Tolkien was a devout Catholic, I think we can also conclude, and he indicated as much, that his story is bound up with the internal logic of the Catholic faith. Which is interesting because what we find in his world are corporeal and rational beings other than the race of men. There are elves and dwarves, not to mention all the others like hobbits and ents. And Tolkien doesn't avoid the question of their state of justice. In the case of the race of men, like us, they are fallen. They were once more like paradisal mankind in the Númenóreans, who Aragorn is descended from. They lived in greater harmony with the world and had greater wisdom and powers, more like the elves, and much longer life. But they fell into pride and the worship of false gods and temptations of Morgoth and Sauron, and were as a result destroyed in like a cataclysmic judgment. After which they become compromised or fallen in a number of ways, including their knowledge, wisdom, their powers, and mortality. So that by the time we're introduced to them in The Lord of the Rings, they're pretty much just like us as a fallen race. Dwarves are another race who are compromised, just in case you're asking, but that's because they're a sort of experimental creation in the first place and never really perfect to begin with. But elves are portrayed as an unfallen race. There are individual elves who are fallen, kind of like angels, but as a race, they aren't fallen, which is why they retain their immortality and much of their wisdom and power. But what's interesting about elves is they are subject to the effects of the fall of the world and other races, because they are part of the world. They have to suffer its ill effects, like conflict and mortal danger. They can be killed, war, and the deterioration of the world itself. This is part of the reason why they are seen as leaving Arda, or the world, for the Grey Havens in The Lord of the Rings. So what answers can we glean from Tolkien's conception of a world, which is arguably his conception of a prehistory of our world, in which there are multiple races of corporeal, rational beings, some of which are in need of redemption and some which are not? Well, the first thing is that I believe Tolkien would say that in spite of the cast of characters and races, that his legendarium is still about the race of men, that they are the central figures in that drama. They were the ones who had a measure of glory and honor and lost it as they fell prey to the temptations of Morgoth and Sauron. And that their redemption story depends on overcoming those temptations by ultimately rejecting the way of Morgoth and Sauron, by rejecting them and then destroying the Ring of Power, which, if you're familiar with the story, is what happens. And when they do so, there's a kind of restoration of peace and harmony, both in relations of the people and the other races, but also in creation itself. So the takeaway here being that the presence of other rational beings and races doesn't diminish the centrality of the story of the fall and the redemption of mankind, and that the fate of the world and other races, whether fallen or not, can still be tied to the fate of mankind. So in a similar way, the existence of other corporeal rational beings in our universe wouldn't necessarily be incompatible with what God has revealed to us about our own creation, which is that we are uniquely created in his image, and that our fall and redemption are the central drama in the universe. The fate of the whole universe, as well as other hypothetical rational races, would be tied to our salvation, even if they weren't fallen, since they would still potentially suffer the ill effects of our fall, most obviously our own disagreeable nature if they ever came into contact with us, as well as the compromised state or even decay of the natural world in which they occupy. And simultaneously and interestingly enough, C.S. Lewis, who was a good friend of Tolkien's and one of the great Christian apologists of our time, briefly addressed this question in his book Miracles, as well as an essay called something like Religion and Rocketry, I think. You might have to double check that. And I may paraphrase his argument poorly, because when I read at least Miracles, I wasn't interested in this question at all. That's not why I was reading that book. So I allowed myself to skim some of those passages more than the others. If I remember correctly, he was cautiously open to the possibility of life on other planets, as well as the possibility that they aren't necessarily fallen races, possibly for the same reasons that Tolkien could imagine fallen and unfallen races living side by side in the same reality or the same cosmos. But Lewis did insist that the Incarnation was a unique event, and that whether alien races existed and were fallen or not, that multiple incarnations would be impossible. He said that if they existed, that God would deal with them in ways that are unknown to us, whether they need redemption or not. And I would say that's pretty much my position. It's possible for God to create other rational beings for purposes only he knows about. If he did, it could be possible for them to remain in a state of original justice or to be fallen. It's possible that they will remain fallen like the angels, or that he may have some other means of redemption known only to him. And like Lewis, I would insist that the incarnation of Christ was a unique event, that for reasons known only to God, he chose mankind as the vehicle through which the incarnation would occur, along with redemption of our species and the whole of creation, which, as Romans 8 says, waits in longing for the sons of God to be revealed. And that is because the incarnation of Christ as man brought humanity and divinity together, so that the second person of the Holy Trinity is now uniquely God in a hypostatic union. For God to be joined in multiple hypostatic unions would undermine the unity of God. Furthermore, Christ's redemption on the cross has always been taught to be a redemption that affects the whole of creation. Colossians 1:20 says that through Jesus Christ, God reconciled all things to himself, both earthly and heavenly. Multiple incarnations and multiple sacrifices would undermine these kinds of Christian doctrines. And lastly, it would undermine man's centrality in the story of creation and redemption, which dilutes the story of salvation through Christ. So again, to summarize, as mere speculation, it could be possible for God to have created other corporeal and rational souls who remained in a state of original justice. It could also be possible that they fell, and that Christ's incarnation and paschal sacrifice contributed to their redemption as it did to the whole of creation, or that God might have saved them in other ways. But whether they exist or not really shouldn't be our preoccupation, because God hasn't revealed any knowledge of such beings to us, either naturally or supernaturally, which is why I don't really spend any time thinking about it, except for the purpose of reconciling brothers within the faith or those outside the faith who think this is somehow a logical deterrent to entering into the faith. And for those reasons, I think that we should, at the very least, avoid accusing one another of being outside the faith because of casual and hypothetical speculation about beings we have little to no evidence of existing, when there are things we do know about that we should devote our energy, our study, prayer, and our contemplation to. Okay, thanks for watching. These videos and this channel are only possible because of viewer support, so if you can spare some help, please consider making a contribution through my website at brianholdsworth.ca, or join my locals community at brianholdsworth.locals.com, where you can interact with myself and other like-minded individuals. We actually just started a monthly Zoom meetup where we're studying some articles of St. Thomas Aquinas in his Summa. So if that's interesting to you, then come join us there. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe.